Welcome to your personalized deep dive.
Oh, cool.
Today, we're going to be taking a look at how to make sure the companies you work with are meeting your standards through vendor audits.
Nice.
I don't know about you, but I've shared my data with more companies than I can count my credit card info, my address, even my birthday.
Yeah.
But how can I be sure they are handling all that information responsibly?
That's the million-dollar question and exactly why vendor audits are so important.
Okay.
It's like this.
Yeah.
Imagine you hire a contractor to remodel your bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
You trust them to do the job right, but you'd probably still check in on their progress, wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Make sure they're following the plans
Yeah.
and using quality materials.
I definitely would. I'm picturing myself with a level and a tape measure,
Yeah,
making sure everything is square.
exactly.
So in this case, we're not talking about bathroom tiles,
Right.
but about things like data security, financial stability, and ethical business practices.
Exactly. And just like you're ultimately responsible for your contractor's work in your home,
Uh-huh.
companies are responsible for making sure their vendors follow the rules too.
For this deep dive, we're using an episode of the Compliance Podcast, The New Compliance Officer's Playbook, as our guide.
Okay, cool.
They really lay out the stakes.
Yeah.
And one of the things that stuck with me was the concept of GDPR. Can you give us a quick rundown of what that is and why it matters?
GDPR stands for the General Data Protection Regulation,
Okay.
and it basically sets rules for how companies can collect and use personal data from people in the European Union.
Got it.
What's interesting is that even if a company isn't based in the EU,
Okay.
they still have to comply with GDPR if they're handling data from European citizens.
So if one of my vendors is messing around with data and violating GDPR,
Yeah.
I could be in trouble even if my company's based in the US.
Potentially, yes.
Oh.
And the fines for violating GDPR could be huge,
Oh, no.
up to tens of millions of euros.
Okay, so that's serious.
This is just one example of why vendor audits are so important.
Right.
It's not just about avoiding fines. It's about protecting yourself from reputational damage, legal headaches,
Yeah.
and even losing customers.
Okay. That's definitely motivating.
Yeah.
The podcast actually breaks down the vendor audit process into 5 key steps.
Okay.
What's the first thing companies should do?
It starts with pre-audit preparation.
Okay.
Just like you wouldn't show up to remodel a bathroom without a plan.
Mm-hmm.
You need to define your scope.
Okay.
What are your company's specific compliance requirements?
Great.
What areas are most important to audit?
So is it about cybersecurity,
Uh-huh.
financial stability, ethical sourcing,
Yeah.
or all of the above?
It could be any or all of those,
Okay.
depending on your industry, the nature of your business,
Right.
and the specific vendors you're working with.
Mm-hmm.
This is where it gets really strategic.
Okay.
You also need to prioritize which vendors pose the greatest risk.
That makes sense. You probably don't need to do a deep dive on the company that delivers your office supplies,
Yeah.
but you'd want to be extra thorough with the vendor that handles your customer's credit card information, right?
Precisely.
Okay.
You want to allocate your resources where they'll have the most impact
Mm-hmm.
once you defined your scope and priorities.
Okay.
The next step is data collection,
Mm-hmm.
gathering all the evidence you'll need.
All right.
This might include contracts,
Mm-hmm.
financial statements, security policies,
Okay.
and maybe even certifications from third-party auditors.
So it's like building a case file.
Yeah.
You need the facts.
Exactly.
Then what? So you
Okay.
just send them a strongly worded email
Yeah.
if you find something fishy?
Not quite.
Okay.
The next stage can involve either on-site or remote auditing.
Okay.
On-site visits allow you to observe the vendor's operations firsthand, talk to employees,
Mm-hmm.
and get a feel for their overall culture of compliance.
That sounds a little like going undercover, like putting on your detective hat and sneaking around the back office.
In a way, yes.
Okay.
But it's not always about catching people doing something wrong.
Yeah.
It's also about gaining a deeper understanding of how the vendor operates
Okay.
and identifying any potential areas for improvement.
And if an on-site visit isn't feasible,
Right.
you can always do a remote audit,
Uh-huh.
focusing on digital records and processes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can request documentation,
Mm-hmm.
conduct virtual interviews,
Yeah.
and even use specialized software to monitor things like data access and security protocols.
I'm already getting the sense that this is more complex than just glancing over a contract.
Yeah.
It seems like you need a good amount of expertise to do this properly.
You're absolutely right.
Okay.
And that's why many companies choose to outsource their vendor audits
Yeah.
to specialized firms that have the experience and resources to conduct thorough assessments.
So we've covered the prep work,
Yeah.
the data gathering, and the actual audit,
Right.
either on-site or remote. What happens next?
The next step is critical,
Okay.
conducting interviews and surveys.
Okay.
This is where you get the human element involved.
Right.
You're talking to people at different levels within the vendor organization,
Uh-huh.
getting their perspective on the company's practices.
That's interesting. So you're not just looking at cold, hard data.
Right.
You're talking to the people in the trenches,
Yeah.
understanding the culture, and seeing if the policies actually translate into real-world actions.
Exactly.
Okay.
For example, you might ask employees about their security training,
Yeah.
how they handle sensitive data,
Mm-hmm.
or what they would do if they suspected a compliance violation.
Interesting.
This can reveal a lot about a company's true commitment to compliance.
I'm guessing this also helps you understand the why behind certain practices, not just the what.
You got it.
Okay.
The qualitative insights you gain from interviews and surveys can be just as valuable as the quantitative data you collect in the earlier stages.
This is all incredibly fascinating. So we've gathered all this information, we've talked to people, we've crunched the numbers. What happens next? Okay, so we've done the prep work, gathered data, conducted the audit,
Yeah.
and even talked to the vendor's employees. What happens with all this intel? What's the next step?
That's where we move into reporting and follow-up.
Okay.
You take all the information you've gathered and put together a comprehensive report outlining your findings.
Right.
Did the vendor meet your expectations?
Yeah.
Were there any gaps or weaknesses in their practices?
So this is where you deliver the verdict. Pass or fail.
It's not always that black and white.
Okay.
Sometimes it's more nuanced.
Okay.
You might find that a vendor is generally doing a good job,
Yeah.
but has a few areas where they need to improve.
And how do you make sure they actually follow through on those improvements?
That's where the follow-up is crucial.
Okay.
You work with the vendor to develop a plan to address any issues you've identified.
Set clear deadlines.
Right.
And establish a process for monitoring their progress.
So it's not just about pointing out problems.
Right.
It's about collaborating with the vendor to find solutions.
Exactly.
And make sure they're on the right track.
It's a continuous improvement process.
Okay.
Remember, vendor audits aren't just a one-time checkup.
Right.
They should be an ongoing part of your risk management strategy.
Makes sense. You wouldn't just get your car checked out once and then never take it to the mechanic again.
Right.
You need regular maintenance to keep things running smoothly.
That's a great analogy.
So,
And speaking of doing things right,
yeah.
the Compliance Playbook podcast highlighted some key best practices
Okay.
for making vendor audits truly effective.
All right.
One of the things they emphasized was the importance of having clear, well-defined policies in place. It's not something you want to be figuring out on the fly.
So it's kind of like having a rule book
Yeah.
that everyone understands and follows.
Exactly. What sorts of things would these policies cover?
They would outline things like how often audits should be conducted,
Okay.
the criteria for selecting vendors to audit, and the specific procedures you'll follow during the audit process.
This ensures consistency and helps you stay organized, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Having those policies documented also makes it easier to track progress over time
Yeah.
and demonstrate to regulators that you're taking compliance seriously.
I imagine things can get pretty complicated if you're dealing with dozens or even hundreds of vendors. Is there any way to simplify the process?
That's where technology can play a big role.
Okay.
The podcast talked about using vendor risk management tools
Yeah.
to automate certain aspects of the process,
Okay.
like risk assessments, performance tracking,
Yeah.
and even real-time compliance monitoring.
So it's like having a digital assistant helping you stay on top of things,
Exactly.
flagging potential issues before they become major problems.
These tools can save your team a lot of time and effort.
Right.
And they can also help you identify patterns and trends that you might not otherwise notice.
I bet that's especially useful when you're dealing with a large volume of data.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And speaking of collaboration,
Yeah.
the podcast also highlighted the importance of involving multiple departments in the vendor audit process.
That makes sense. A vendor might be handling so many different aspects of your business.
Yeah.
You'd need different teams to weigh in and assess the risks from their unique perspectives. Like, if a vendor is processing payments, you definitely want your finance team involved.
Precisely.
Okay.
And if the vendor is handling sensitive customer data, you want to involve your IT and security teams to make sure they're following best practices for data protection.
It seems like effective vendor audits are a real team effort.
They definitely are.
Okay.
And it's just like with any good team, communication is key.
Yeah.
Make sure everyone understands their role, knows what information they need to contribute, and is kept informed about the progress of the audit.
So we've got our clear policies. We're leveraging technology. And we've assembled our A-team of experts from across the company.
Right.
What else do we need to keep in mind?
One of the most important things is prioritization.
Okay.
You can't audit every single vendor with the same level of intensity.
Right.
You need to be strategic about how you allocate your resources.
Right. It's like triage in a hospital.
Yeah.
You need to focus on the most critical cases first.
Exactly.
Okay.
So how do you decide which vendors deserve the most attention?
Yeah.
That's where risk assessment comes in.
Okay.
You need to evaluate each vendor based on factors like the type of data they handle, the potential impact of a breach, and their overall compliance track record.
So a company that handles highly sensitive data like medical records or financial information would be considered higher risk than a company that simply provides office supplies. Right.
Exactly. Okay. You also want to consider the vendor's track record. Have they had any security breaches in the past?
Right.
Do they have a strong culture of compliance?
It seems like a lot of this comes down to intuition and experience.
It does.
Yeah.
But there are also tools and frameworks available
to
help companies formalize their risk assessment process.
Right.
Many organizations use a system where they assign vendors a risk rating based on a set of predefined criteria.
So it's like a grading system for vendors.
Yeah.
The higher the risk, the more scrutiny they receive.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this helps you prioritize your audit efforts.
Yeah.
Ensuring that you're focusing on the vendors that pose the greatest potential threat.
All of this is super helpful.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, is there ever a time when a vendor audit might uncover something really serious? Like a major security flaw or a blatant violation of regulations?
It definitely happens.
Really?
And that's why it's so important to be proactive.
Okay.
The podcast actually shared a real-life example of a financial institution that had a close call with a vendor that wasn't handling data properly.
Ooh, tell me more.
This financial institution had partnered with a vendor to handle sensitive customer data.
Okay.
But when they conducted an audit, they discovered the vendor wasn't encrypting the data properly.
Wait, they weren't encrypting the data?
Exactly.
That's like leaving your front door wide open and hoping no one walks in?
It is. And to make matters worse,
Oh, no.
they'd also had a minor data breach that they hadn't even reported.
Oh, wow.
It was a real wake-up call for the financial institution.
I can imagine that could have been a disaster for them and their customers
Right.
if they hadn't caught it in time. It really highlights why vendor audits are so crucial.
Yeah.
They're not just a box to tick. They're about protecting everyone involved.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it reinforces the need to be proactive.
Okay.
Don't wait for a problem to arise.
Right.
Regular audits can help you identify and address potential risks before they turn into major headaches.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, the key takeaways here are to have clear policies, use technology to streamline things, collaborate across teams,
Right.
prioritize high-risk vendors, and above all, stay proactive.
You nailed it.
Okay, good.
It's also about constantly learning and adapting.
Right.
The world of data security and compliance is always evolving.
Yeah.
So it's important to stay informed about new threats and best practices.
It's like a never-ending game of cat and mouse, isn't it?
In a way, yes.
But that's what makes it so challenging and interesting.
Exactly.
What really strikes me is how much this aligns with our own values here at the Deep Dive.
Oh, yeah.
We're all about empowering you with knowledge so you can make informed decisions.
And in today's world, that includes being savvy about who you trust with your data.
You know, the podcast focuses on companies.
Right.
But I think there's a really important takeaway here for all of us as individuals, too.
Well,
It's about being informed consumers.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
We should all be asking questions about how companies handle our data, what security measures they have in place,
Right, yeah.
and whether they've been audited by reputable third parties.
It's like before you hand over your keys to a valet, you might want to check if they have a good driving record, right?
Exactly.
Same idea here.
Yeah,
We need to be discerning about who we trust.
precisely.
Okay.
And this is where knowledge is power.
Right.
By understanding the concepts we've discussed today, you can ask the right questions,
Yeah.
do your research,
Right.
and ultimately choose to do business with companies that align with your values.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's about taking control and not just blindly trusting, but being an active participant in safeguarding your own information.
So as you go about your day interacting with various companies and services, remember this deep dive.
Right.
Remember the importance of vendor audits.
Right.
And the role they play in ensuring accountability and trust.
And here's a final thought to leave you with.
Okay.
What questions would you ask a company before trusting them with your data?
That's a good one.
It's something we should all be thinking about in today's digital world.
It's been a fascinating exploration, and I hope this deep dive has given you some valuable insights to ponder.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of vendor audits.
My pleasure.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic.
Yeah.
So feel free to share your comments and questions with us on social media.
Definitely.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep diving deep.